We're talking about a condition that affects 1.5 million women in Britain, but also one that's little known about or properly understood often. We're talking about endometriosis.
Today, a government inquiry into how care for patients with that condition can be improved has been released. Dr Larisa Corda is here to tell us more, and we're going to find out what living with endometriosis is like, because we can talk to Bhavni Fowler as well. First of all, Doctor, the report, what do you think this government inquiry will actually achieve?
Well, I think that the statistics and the figures and the information that's come out of it is really rather shocking. So first of all, we've established the fact that so many women across the UK are affected by it. So on average, 10% of women across their lifetime will suffer from endometriosis.
What is it? So
endometriosis is a condition where the lining, cells that belong to the lining of the womb are found outside of the womb, most commonly in the pelvis, but actually around 10% of women will also have it outside of the pelvis, so typically in the thorax. And those are the ones that find that that don't necessarily get diagnosed correctly and on time. We know that the average time to diagnosis, and this is actually really shocking, is 8 years. In the UK, and it's not changed in the last decade at all.
Why? So is that because the medical profession find it difficult to diagnose?
There's a combination of different reasons. First of all, we just don't discuss it. I mean, when it comes to menstrual health, we just don't talk about it. So it's been made compulsory now to discuss it in England in schools, but it's not the same everywhere else in the UK. So we need to set a record on that and a precedent to make sure that all young women understand what a normal period is and what normal symptoms for them are, so they understand when to go to the doctor and when to present. There's also a cultural issue around the fact that we just find it too embarrassing. There's too much of a stigma to talk about your periods, talk about pain during sex, chronic pain, any other problems that you might suffer. So, for example, going to the toilet to empty your bowels and pass urine, that can all be affected. So all really, really personal. Exactly, they find difficult to discuss in the first place and to bring up. Then the effect on mental health. So we found that, you know, across all cases where mental health is affected, it's just a subject that's not really discussed. But you're right, Ruth, in the sense that actually we as doctors and as medical professionals need to be better informed about it so that we can anticipate that diagnosis a little bit better than we do at the moment.
Look, so much more to talk to you about as regards treatment, if it can be reversed, River, but I'd like to know from Bhavni now, who we talked about there, how much, Bhavni, you identify with what Dr Corda has said there in terms of your experience and when you first realised this was happening to you, or what was happening to you.
Well, it's really interesting that Larisa there talks about understanding your body and whether what you're going through is normal or not. So I started my periods when I was age 12. And I thought it was really normal to feel like I was going to pass out on the bathroom floor every month, to have to double up my sanitary towels because I was bleeding so heavily. I just had no idea that what I was experiencing was abnormal. In those days, you know, we didn't really do menstrual health education in school, and coming from an Asian community, it's a bit of a double whammy in terms of the taboos and the subject being a taboo subject. So, you know, within the family or the wider family network, we didn't really talk about periods. Periods are a very dirty topic from our communities, and really not one that we talked about. So had I known that what I was experiencing wasn't normal, then, you know, I think I would have been at the doctor's a lot sooner. But really my journey started because I needed surgery. I had a cyst that was the size of a grapefruit that was on my left ovary, and it was twisting. So I was in excruciating pain, far more than even the endometriosis itself, and I was rushed in for emergency surgery. It was really only when I woke up that I was told that I had endometriosis. I'd never heard of it. I didn't really understand what it was, and sadly the nurse at the time when I woke up just said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just painful periods." And then I was sent home after that surgery with a few leaflets. I'm probably really not very well informed still. So it took a lot of time of research and I guess coming to terms with what living with a chronic condition really means.
And how is it living with that chronic condition? It's made you infertile. That must have been a terrible blow to receive that news.
Yeah, to be honest with you, this whole journey has been full of blows, left, right, and centre. And one thing that I'd like to come back to actually is around mental health and the effect that living with this kind of condition really has on your mental health. But, you know, my 20s was spent in and out of hospital. I had 4 surgeries. And to be honest with you, I thought that I would somehow have a magic cure or I'd fix myself, you know, that these surgeries would somehow get rid of everything. And really, it was the last surgery when I was 28 that I was told, you know what, if you can, go and have children, because I don't think you are going to be able to have children necessarily by yourself. And if they were to actually undertake any further surgery with me, came with a huge risk of a full hysterectomy and a partial bowel resection, which perhaps could have had further long-term effects for me as well. So, you know, age 28, where all my friends and family were starting to settle down, have children, it was pretty awful to think that that really wasn't going to be the thing for me. You know, coming from a big Asian family, having children is your kind of natural path in life. It's something that you're always going to do. So, yeah, infertility was just one part of kind of coming to terms with living with this condition.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine, Dr. Corda, that listening to this, listening to you, listening to Bhavni, that it's so important to get the message then to young women to say, don't put up with painful, excruciating, painful periods. It's not normal. And also for the medical profession to recognise it more quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So even if someone tells you or makes you feel as if it's all in your head and that it's normal, if you understand that that's not normal for you, please go and keep a symptom diary and make sure you go and see someone who does take your symptoms seriously. We need to improve that awareness. But I just want to raise 2 really important points that Bhavni mentioned, and those are of gender bias and some racial and ethnic bias which exist in the healthcare system. So the first problem that we have is that when women or young girls go and present to the doctor, they're not necessarily taken as seriously as when men and boys do it. And we don't know why this exists, but it's been proven across the board. And the second part of this is also that ethnic bias, when we know our Afro-Caribbean and our Asian and ethnic minority populations have a diagnosis of endometriosis made much, much later. So they're made to suffer for much, much longer. And I mean, 8 years, to take 8 years to diagnose something, by which point the endometriosis has gone on to cause a lot more problems than the scarring. Potentially, Bhavni's infertility could have been avoided along with that cyst had we acted sooner.
But can it be corrected?
Yes. So the good news is that if you spot the signs and symptoms early enough, so if you go and see a doctor and the doctor recognises it as potential endometriosis, then they can send you for investigations. So the first thing that you'd have done is an ultrasound scan, which can sometimes give away the fact that potentially you do have endometriosis. Ultimately, we can do laparoscopic surgery, so where we look inside and we take samples of tissue to diagnose this as categorically being endometriosis. There are many things that women can try to help themselves, so we don't have time to go into it detail here, but there are things on the app where I've spoken a lot about diet and the effect of exercise as well. Living without toxins in your environment, because we know that environmental factors can make the endometriosis worse because they exacerbate the inflammation, and ultimately you can take medication in the form of the contraceptive pill, but it shouldn't just be a case of being given the pill and seeing how you go. It needs to be investigated properly, and you do need to apply these lifestyle factors to it.
And just listening to Bhavni's story, and you talk so passionately and so knowledgeably about it all, obviously just having experienced everything, Bhavni, but we hear who should know, who should be informed, and women should be aware of their own bodies. But I also imagine it takes an education on behalf of a woman's partner to understand what is going on, that's something that is important too.
Absolutely. And actually, so I'm also a support group leader for Endometriosis UK. And interestingly enough, there have been other girls that have come because their partners have told them what they're going through isn't normal because of what they've experienced with previous partners. So it's really interesting that you talk about this. You know, from my experience in school, we did sex education, of which part of it was a part of your periods, but we did it separately. Boys were in a separate room to the girls, and we no doubt had a different curriculum. So it's really good and really important that menstrual well-being is now on the curriculum in the UK. Well, I should say in England only. But it's really important that conversation happens in a much wider sphere, and that it includes everybody, boys as well.
Thank you very much for talking about it today. As you said, it's important to have the conversation.
Yeah,
so
really
thank you very much, Dr.
And for the men
Larisa.
too, as well, as you say, because they do have an interest in it. Every time I talk about it, I know lots of men do tune in too. So thank you for raising that. And for anyone who wants more advice about diet and exercise and plans, please check out the This Morning app.